Hello, everybody, and welcome to an episode of McRADcast B-Sides. Today, we're going to talk about the movie Parasite and give our thoughts on it. So, Josh, you ready to do this thing?
I am. This is a good one.
It is. We are still coming to you remotely. We're just doing a phone call today. So once again, if the audio quality wasn't terrible in the last one we did, and we got some feedback on how it didn't sound too bad, but we will be back to normal soonish. But
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, for sure. So, but yeah, we're talking about the movie Parasite. Just to give you a quick overview, it is a movie you can watch on streaming via Hulu at the time of this recording, anyway. It's on Hulu, and of course you can rent or buy it on any of the services you use, whether it be Amazon, Apple TV, any of that stuff. So
yeah.
And I will just start off by saying that I think this was a fantastic movie. It is, just to give you guys a quick overview of it, it is a Korean movie, and I'm going to give this up front because usually when we do reviews or B-sides, what we've been doing, and we talk about movies or shows, we will talk about general thoughts, and then we will give a spoiler alert, just so you guys know that any plot points will be spoiled. This is a tough one to do without really...
Yeah, you almost have to do a movie critic type review, you know what I mean, rather than like a little bit more in-depth review. Because you have to hit just the very surface of this, because otherwise you're just going to ruin the brilliance of this movie, which is the surprise factor.
So what I am going to say is, if you plan on watching the movie, as much as I want you to listen to this episode, I would probably say pause this and watch the movie. It's about 2 hours, 15 minutes. It's a little longer, but
yeah, it is a doozy.
It's well worth it. And I'll get into my thoughts on the length and all that too, but just straight up, there are some probably be some mild spoilers up front, and then we'll give you a definite, after this, we're pretty much going to break down the plot of this movie.
Part of spoiling this movie is telling you that the first 30 minutes is kind of weird and awkward, and, maybe even longer than that, right? It's brilliant in the long run, but I thought the first almost hour was a little awkward.
Sure. And I think that, we'll get into it. So,
but the payoff is much bigger, right? So if you can get through the first hour of awkwardness and you're like, what is going on here? Mm-hmm. Keep going. We urge you, continue on to the end of the movie. The payoff of this movie is worth the price of admission.
And I'm actually going to talk about that on a broader scope, not just this movie, but in some of the Asian cinema that I appreciate. And it seems to be kind of a running theme, or not a theme, but just a thing that they do.
It's kind of how they deliver
and they
on
do
the promise.
They do it really well, too.
Yeah,
really well.
They do.
So, but heads up, I know, and this isn't to cast any aspersions to anyone. I know a lot of people don't dig subtitled movies. This is definitely in Korean, and it's subtitled in English. So if that is off-putting to you, I still urge you to try to check it out.
It's so good, though, man. I'm not a giant subtitle person, in general, as far as the movie's concerned, but I have in the last year or so started watching movies and shows with subtitles, because I think you can catch some things in the subtitles that were meant to be there that you barely hear and stuff like that matter to the show. So I've actually enjoyed watching with some subtitles even on non-foreign films lately. So that helped me transition to this much better. I used to hate subtitled films.
Yeah, well, and I've been a subtitle guy a long time. Like even on English things, I watch with subtitles. I didn't for a while just because
it seems like an old person thing,
right? But I've been doing that since a long time ago. Me and Scott Norton used to do that way back in the day, and people would be like,
"You just pick things up that you're meant to have known that just got lost in translation, making it into a film."
Exactly,
right? You know what I mean? Like characters' names that you get to see consistently, and that don't point out like, hey, it's so and so speaking. A lot of that stuff is weird how it translates better. You understand the story more.
Absolutely. So just to give my general thoughts, I think it was a great film. There's a lot of plot going on that unravels really nicely. And it starts kind of, you think you know what's going on, and it never, I don't want to say there's really any like major twist, but they definitely
it feels like it's just out of your grasp the whole movie.
Exactly. But then the next scene kind of unravels a new thing and you go,
Yes.
oh, okay.
Yeah. And so, but I mean, it doesn't drag you on for too long. It drags you on for long enough where you're like, I almost had it. I thought I knew what was going on. I'm pretty sure I know what's going on now. And now I don't. Okay. I had no idea that was coming. Right.
Sure.
But it's not like these like giant surprises. They're just minor. It's almost like alternate reality, right? It feels like you're supposed to go down this path, but they just take you just slightly down a different path and beyond what you expected. It's like they're just outside of your expectation every time, and it's brilliant the way they do it.
Absolutely. And so just to give you a brief kind of overview of it, what it is, it's about a South Korean family who is very poor.
Yep.
And they live in, and I don't know much about the Korean culture. My extent in Korean culture comes from like Bobby Lee's podcast, so that's absolutely none. But I can definitely see where it is kind of in line with a lot of other Asian cultures. But basically, it's a family of four. It's a father, mother, a son, and a daughter.
And both of the children are adults.
Yes, college-aged kids, probably 20-ish, probably in that neighborhood, and because they talk about going to university and stuff. So,
yes.
But basically, they're a poor family trying to live, and they live in this like sub-basement type apartment. So it's not straight up in like the basement of somewhere because they can still see outside, but the window is like, you can.
It's a weird setup for sure.
But apparently, that's like a thing in some of those places,
urban areas.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't know much about Korean culture and the way that works, but they kind of paint that picture for you pretty well.
Yeah.
And it's basically, it just starts with them kind of, it starts kind of funny, and this obviously isn't a spoiler because it's the first thing that happens, but it's like, oh, the fucking free Wi-Fi is not there anymore, and they're like with their phones trying to like scurry around and find a place to get on WhatsApp or whatever to
yes.
But go ahead.
You hear the weirdness of this movie, in my opinion, is that you hear that it's like a shocking movie, and so you're thinking like horror, thriller, what is going on here? And it never identifies itself as anything, in my opinion.
I think if anything, and I may be wrong, I think it's actually more of like a dark comedy. Like
I thought the same thing.
Not overall, obviously, because I mean, there's definitely some parts that are not comical.
It's very dry humor, right, the whole time. But it is a funny movie in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, and there's
certain ways.
There's some very dark humor in it, which I'm a huge fan of when it's done correctly and done and presented well, and they do it so well. But basically, it's and we're gonna get into some mild spoiler territory because there's no way around it. But it starts basically with this. It paints this picture of this very poor family. They're they obviously been snaking Wi-Fi off of someone. They even make the comment that, oh, apartment so and so changed the password on this Wi-Fi spot or whatever. So it's just them trying to figure out how to get on their phones and figure out the next step. And they take a job folding like pizza boxes. Is that the bit?
That's the first job you see them doing.
And they're watching YouTube videos, and you've probably seen those YouTube videos if you're listening, of like the record
the
pizza box
super
folding
fast box makers.
Yeah. And so they're trying to mimic that so they can get as many done as possible. And it starts off with turmoil with their a quote unquote boss or whatever, their contracted person that's paying them to do this, and
tell them the quality on their boxes was shit.
Right. And so it's it's obviously the picture painted immediately of poor family who
struggling to get by.
Now, one thing I liked about it in the beginning too was that most of the time in cinema, at least in my experience in cinema and art and books and anything like that, where an Asian culture is portrayed, there's a heavy emphasis on the way Asian cultures view like honor and societal standing.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't really touch on that at first because it's the protagonist. It's not like the honorable Asian family who fell on hard times. They are the like extreme lower class, right?
Yeah.
And they don't
grifters.
And the way they talk to each other, it's kind of it was very reminiscent of like the people I grew up around, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I connected them with that really early about how they're they're talking shit to each other, but like ribbing each other in a really fun way, because that's just how, a lot of times how poor people, work through those things.
Yep, that's how they cope.
But they didn't touch on that whole thing of like lost honor and stuff. So it was immediately like, okay, this is like finally a take on like the lowest of the low, Yeah. And I really liked how they portrayed that. And like I said, it pretty much, the way the plot's introduced happens pretty quickly. So, you got them folding their pizza boxes, trying to find Wi-Fi and all that. And that's the parts you're kind of laughing at. You're like, I've definitely tried to find free Wi-Fi before, like snake Wi-Fi off my neighbor or whatever. And it's a buddy of his, of the son, comes to visit, right?
Yeah.
And he brings a present for him and stuff. And I don't want to get into that. You can watch that part because it's kind of cool the way that unfolds and the imagery of that and all that, but that's not really...
Oh, brilliant. I think, as a matter of fact, I think we should probably just stop describing the movie and tell people, just urge people before we get into any spoilers, just go see it, because the surprise of this movie and how it unfolds is the brilliance of it.
Yeah, and this is... so what I'll do, I'll take a little detour real quick and then I'll get us back on track, but I'm a big fan of... I don't want to say I'm a big fan of Asian cinema, because I think I know like 3 directors that I like and have watched, so I probably need to branch out more. But if you want to talk about Korean directors, I can't think of this director's name, but this movie came out last year, 2019, I think.
Yeah,
middle
a lot
or
of
anything.
fanfare.
And I've slept on this for a while, so I'm actually glad I finally watched it. And I've been meaning to for a while, and now I'm really glad I did. I think it was a fantastic movie.
Oh, me too.
Speaking of Korean directors, there's one other that I know whose name is Chan-wook Park, and he did the movie Old Boy. And they did an American remake of it with Josh Brolin, which, I mean, it was okay. I had already seen the original, and I'm not trying to be the, I'm cooler than you because I saw the Korean version or whatever. I just had seen it because I hung out with people who recommended it. And
film nerds and stuff.
It's one of my favorite movies. Like, it's definitely, like, Old Boy is probably in my top, at least my top 20. I don't want to get into that. You can say top 10 and all that all day, but it's in my top 20 for sure. So the remake with Josh Brolin is like, it's not bad, but it's just, to me, it was like, well, we didn't need that. But I understand the accessibility of it for people. So it's still a cool movie. So either one you watch, I think you'll enjoy it. But I do suggest watching that movie as well. But anyway, Korean director. And Old Boy is actually part of a kind of a trilogy. And they're not like technically sequels of each other, but it's called the Vengeance Trilogy. And it's Old Boy, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, and a movie called Lady Vengeance. And they're all really great. And I recommend those as well. I saw a lot of those are a little grittier. Obviously, they're not the same style of movie, but you can see a lot of you can see like through their culture, like the influences. And so that was cool. And then there's a Japanese director I like. His name's Takashi Miike, and I'm probably pronouncing that terribly, but he did the movie Ichi the Killer. He did a movie called Audition, which I think is a really, really great movie. And the reason the reason I bring that up is because it also is a slow burn, almost like a chore to watch. And then the payoff is what makes the whole movie worth it.
Yeah.
So that's a movie that I've had people say before, like, man, I tried to watch that movie and I just can't do it. I can't get through it. And I go, please do, like, just do, because it's so good, but it is one of those things where you're like, what is going on? And like, you're kind of bored and you're kind of like, okay, I get it, but like,
they lull you into some sort of normal thing.
But the last like 20 to 25 minutes is like, oh shit.
It's a lot how Tarantino did his latest movie.
Yeah, okay, and I haven't seen that still, by the way.
Yes,
I need to watch
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is that. It is a very, very slow burn into the final scene of the movie is the only action in the whole movie.
But the genius about that, though, and sorry to cut you off, but the genius about that is that you can say, like, well, you could say an hour and a half of the movie sucked and then 30 minutes was good, but that's not true.
No.
An hour and a half seemed like it was like, what? But then the last 30 minutes makes it.
Payoff is gigantic.
And then you start to look.
Change.
Yeah, and then you start to look back at it and you go, holy shit, that's genius.
Yes. Like, because with Tarantino, the way he did Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you were waiting for it to pop off because he's known for those over the top action scenes, right? And so that's what Tarantino does. So the whole movie, you're waiting for that to happen. And you get through the whole movie and you're like, what is this right now? What is happening? Why am I even watching anymore? And then the action happens and the payoff is so fucking good in that movie too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, and I want to watch that one. But so, and that's the reason I brought up Audition by Takashi Miike. Now, Miike does a lot of, I don't want to say horror, but the thriller, suspense stuff. And
this one kind of becomes that, but not really.
Yeah.
Right?
And we'll talk about that turn that it took. Because I thought something else was about to happen.
I know, dude. Every time you thought something was going to happen in this movie, it never did. Something slightly different happened.
Right.
It's that is the most brilliant thing, in my opinion, about this movie. Mm-hmm. It wasn't necessarily the payoff in the end, although it was very good. I thought if they never let you catch them in anything, right? You never predicted the next thing that was going to happen.
Yep. That's very true. It's and it keeps you interested too. Like there was never a point where I was like, man, I need to take a break, or I just was like, okay, what's about to happen?
Well, here's the thing. For me, it was a chore in the first 45, 50 minutes, and I was watching it with my girlfriend for that time, and when something's not like fairly going, she's not a slow burn person, so she was like, can we please not watch this anymore? And I was like, yeah, I'll watch it later, don't worry. So I turned it off and came back to it the next day, and it was literally like 4 minutes after that is when the movie turns into this, a thrill a minute kind of movie, right? And so it's like the first hour is mostly slow burn. There's no jeopardy. There's no craziness. There's nothing going on. And then boom, it's like literally I turned the movie back on the next day, and for 4 minutes it was boom, and that switch had flipped, and the movie was, an exciting till the end kind of movie. When this movie starts to go, it runs fast. It's hard. It's a lot to keep up with.
Yes, absolutely. But I think my overall is it's fantastic, and I'm really glad it is a movie that I got to watch. So go watch it. Like do it. Even if it's not usually your style, because it's such a good story.
It's so good.
And there's never a point in it. And like I said, I don't know if it's because I'm so used to American films and that I haven't watched something like this in a while, but there's never a point where I'm like, well, that was cheesy. I wish they wouldn't have, this is a cool movie, but that one thing was kind of cheesy. I never did that. Right.
No,
it was just always like,
it was a cool fucking movie. Is what it was.
So I think at this point, we kind of just say like we're walking into complete spoiler territory.
Oh yeah, if you've already seen it, welcome, and we're just here to share our opinions on it.
So for those who paused us and rejoined us after watching, welcome back. And that what we were just kind of talking about in the first kind of 15, 20 minutes of this. So basically, the title is perfect. Parasite, and and once again, everybody, when I talk about some of this stuff, I'm very ignorant to a lot of things, so just bear with me. A lot of parasites in nature, apparently the parasite host, it's a mutually beneficial thing. Sometimes, not always. Sometimes it's definitely terrible. There's a lot of that kind of overtone, especially in the beginning of that mutually beneficial relationship between parasite and host. And for those that, like I said, if you've seen it, you know that it's not about an actual parasite. It's not about a monster. It's not about, it's not a horror movie per se. There's definitely some horror elements at some point, I think, but
it pops off pretty quick.
So kind of picking up from where we left off, they're folding pizza boxes. They're looking for Wi-Fi signals. They're poor. They're just a super poor family, and they're trying to figure out what their next move is.
And they're all kind of a bunch of little shitheads too.
Yes, and you can tell that they're down to run some schemes.
Yeah, you can tell they're kind of con artists from the beginning. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
With the boxes and all that shit, and they're trying to haggle their way into more money, even though they got a discounted rate and all that stuff.
I do want to say before we move on, though, on the front of Takashi Miike, go check out his movies, especially Audition. There's another movie called Visitor Q that's really good. There's one called Happiness of the Katakuris, Ichi the Killer. Just go do it.
I'll have to watch them.
And also, if you've seen the movie Hostel, have you seen that movie?
I think I saw it.
It was an Eli Roth horror flick. It was about the people pay to pretty much torture and kill people that stay, they pick them up from these hostels in Europe and stuff.
Yeah.
And anyway, there's a scene where they pull up to the place. I think it's in Hostel. And Takashi Miike, the director, he's like a cast member. He's like a character. And he walks out of the place, and they're walking in. And he's like, "Be careful, you'll spend all your money in there." And you're like, "Oh, that's a nice little nod," because Eli Roth was a big Miike fan. Anyway, sorry. Get back on track here, but yeah, the family is kind of shitheads. But they're immediately kind of pretty much likable, I think.
Oh yeah.
They are the
you're rooting for them.
Yeah. So, and I want to get into that in a second because what you just said is huge to me. So the son, his buddy comes to visit, who is in college currently.
Yep.
And he brings a gift to the people, and we don't have to get into that whole thing because that's kind of an imagery thing that plays out in the movie that's kind of cool that you can just
that's a super cool thing. I think we should talk about it. Yeah, how because at this point everybody's either seen it or they're just here for the story.
Sure. So he brings this rock essentially, right? This
it's supposed to be a good luck rock.
Yeah, it's a stone, and it's a essentially a piece of art, but it's meant to bring wealth. It's a symbol of wealth, and apparently these stones they can represent different things, and it was basically just a gift. Hey, bring wealth to your home. Very very nice gesture, and it was kind of cool looking too. I was like, I kind of want one of those. But,
super cool.
So he then it kind of cuts to them having their own little. They're eating or drinking or something. They're drinking, whatever they're drinking. They're getting hammered. And the friend mentions he's tutoring this girl, this rich family, and she's like a sophomore in high school or something like that. I don't know what their grade thing is like. Right. But he says 10th grade, I think. Yeah. And I don't know if that equates to the same in American schools, but whatever.
That's a good point.
But she's in high school essentially, and he's an English tutor for her, and he mentions that he's going to study abroad in America, I believe.
Yep.
And he's like, hey, you should step in and tutor this girl. They pay really well. And
yeah, he's hooking his homie up.
Yes. And
he's actually grooming her to be his girlfriend once she's old enough.
And that's a weird thing too. Like that whole dynamic was weird.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I don't know how they view that kind of stuff in like Korean society, but it was definitely very predatory, very
definitely a little bit of that.
Yeah, but yeah, he's basically like, hey, I like this girl. I'm going to ask her out once she starts college.
Dips, basically.
But I'm going to study, and I don't want a bunch of creeps around her. I trust you, and you would.
Yeah, which is super weird considering where it went, right?
Right.
It's like, I trust you, and then that dude is scheming to be that chick's girlfriend immediately.
Yeah, but the weird thing was like, he's like you would be a good English tutor, and like you don't really know the background, but he kind of explains it, and he's like, yeah, you can do it. And he's like, but I've never gone to college. He's like, how am I going to get the job if they don't blah blah blah,
and then that's when the grifting starts.
Yes, so apparently his sister's really good at the Photoshop and the
forgeries,
and web design. So she forges like his documents, and he applies to the family with the recommendation from the friend. Like he's like, hey, this is my guy, hire him while I'm gone. And that's what happens essentially, right? Yeah. And so they take off. He goes to the family, and the wife is very, very naive to say the least.
Yes.
She is there. It's a rich family. The husband owns a company, or at least runs a company. They never really say what it was. I don't think.
You can tell he's very wealthy.
Yeah, but it's a big corporation of some sort, and he's the top dog. And they have a son and a daughter. The son is what is he, like 6, 7 years old? Something?
Yeah, he's about a 6 or 7 year old bull doucher.
Yeah, and he's wild and crazy. So basically, he comes in, he impresses the mom immediately with she sets in on one of their English lessons, and that's what So this is the part that really made me enjoy the whole thing was like, they're not just con artists. Like they are bullshitting their way through a little bit, but they're actually good at the stuff that they're doing.
Yes.
Right.
They're actually brilliant, like grifters. They're brilliant con artists. Is what they are.
But like he was legitimately like a decent teacher.
Yes.
And so he was like, but I'm going to turn on the bullshit. So, and the reason was because of what kind of unfolds next, which I didn't really see happening because I was like, oh, it's just him and what's going to happen here. But they mention while they're sitting there, they somehow the son comes up. Oh, he's rambunctious and crazy, but he's an artist. Look at this art he did. And he gives this like critique of the art that's like, you can tell he's blowing smoke, obviously, but the mom is just eating it up. Like, oh, he's a genius. Yeah. And it's like, I think they even say like the art is Basquiat-esque, which is Basquiat was, if you don't know, was a pretty amazing artist. Go check him out. Anyway, you know, and the lady's eating it up. Oh yeah, but all the art teachers, they don't know how to handle him and yada yada yada. And here's where the real the long con starts, right? Yep. Oh well, I know. I remember a girl who he just
makes up a person that is his sister,
right? But he's talking about her like, oh, this chick from from university.
She's brilliant and. You know, she's really, really sought after. I'll just see if she's open and available for you.
Now, here's where I thought the coolness of the movie was like, he didn't know that they were looking for an art teacher when he showed up.
No, he just took the opportunity.
Yeah, he was an opportunist. And he goes, oh, well, shit, I got you, man. And
yeah, like I don't think he intended to fall in love with the girl he was teaching, but I think it ended up happening.
Yeah, and I think it honestly just started as, well, shit, I can just make a lot of money from this rich family. And maybe steal some shit or something. You know, that probably was where it started.
Taking the opportunity, and then they just take it too far.
Mm-hmm. So he gets his sister involved as the art teacher of this kid. He's teaching the daughter English, and she's teaching the son
without
art.
The lady's knowledge that they are brother and sister. They're pretending not to be.
Exactly. And then the sister really impressed me with her like whole bit about art therapy and like,
oh my gosh, dude,
diagnose the kid. And then when they're like, how the hell did you come up with that? She's like, I just Googled a video on it and then I ad lib from there. And I was like, holy shit. It's so good. But I don't know if it's between the son and the wife or the sister and the wife. That's where I was talking about that dynamic between Parasite and Host.
Yeah,
I think it's between the daughter when she says something, and the wife, the rich wife lady, is like, she's like, "Oh, you just don't know the true nature of people," right? And she's talking to the person who's conning the shit out of her.
Oh yeah,
and you're like, okay, so it's like that ignorance is bliss kind of. She's like, "Oh, you have no idea what people are capable of," and it's like, "Oh,
oh, do I?"
Yeah. So that was cool, but then essentially the whole family gets involved. Right?
Yeah, and they go way over the line.
Mm-hmm. So to kind of speed through that part, because you've seen it or you're going to see it, or at this point you're just wanting to hear about it. But basically,
they go from like a decent family of grifters to way over the line really fast.
Oh yeah, because the daughter, the family's like personal driver, is tasked with taking her home. And it's one of those things where
she leaves her old undies in there.
Yeah,
and gets him fired.
Right, gets him fired. Leaves some drawers in there, and they're like, "He's been fucking in the car," and it's crazy. So just turns out that their dad used to be a driver, and apparently that's a bigger part of Korean culture, at least, is driving for wealthy folks, like having a chauffeur, so to speak.
Yep.
And it's like an honorable thing. Apparently, like it's it's not like a top tier profession, but it's like
it's like a workman's job around here would be considered.
Right, but the dad has like this medal, and I'm assuming it had something to do with that. Like I can't remember exactly. Like it was basically an honor. Like he had some high honor in this service industry.
Yep.
And they get him on as the new driver, and then they get the maid fired and get the mom in as the new like housekeeper.
Yep. And meanwhile, the family is unaware of their relationships at all. They assume that they don't associate with each other than like professionally.
Right. Yeah. They have no idea this is a family of people.
Yes.
Like they have no clue. Yeah. But it starts this becomes like a bigger plot device than I thought it would be. And it plays out really well. Is earlier on when they first get the housekeeper fired and they get the mom in there, there's that scene where they're all bringing groceries and stuff in, and when everyone's not looking, the dad like pats the mom on the ass, kind of a haha. Well, the little kid comes up and like smells the dad. Remember that part?
Mm-hmm.
He comes up and smells the dad, and he's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" They're like, "Hey, you fucking kid, get out of here!" And then he runs up to the mom, who's posing as the housekeeper now, and smells her, and he's like, "They smell the same, huh?" And they're like, "Hey, you're rude. Get the fuck out." And you're kind of like, "Oh, what? Oh, the kid understands what's but he doesn't know what's happening. But he kind of
doesn't know what's happening, but he caught him.
But everyone passes it off as like he's just being a rude ass little kid, right? Yep. But that becomes such a bigger thing that we'll talk about later in a minute. But you kind of go, oh shit, the kid's onto something here, and then it really starts to ramp up really fast, right?
And they get really close to being caught a lot.
Sure.
There are a lot of situations where you're like, fucking asshole clinch, they might get caught now. But at the same time, once they get the housekeeper fired, you kind of don't feel bad for them anymore. For a little while, right? But then they still make you root for them in some weird way.
But that's the part I wanted to talk about. Is so let's kind of jump a little bit here. It kind of comes to a head when, well, I say comes to a head. It starts to come to a head when the family decides that for the kid's birthday they're going to go out of town camping.
Yes.
So at this point, all four of the people, the main characters, so to speak, decide they're just going to stay and live it up at this house over the weekend while the family's gone.
Yeah, baller status.
Right? Because this house is amazing, by the way.
Fucking insanely cool house.
The house is like, it's built by
concrete everywhere, dude.
Built by a renowned architect that used to live there, and he moved out. I mean, it's a whole story in it. But yeah, amazing house. So they decide they're going to live it up for the weekend while the family's out of town. And obviously they're drinking all the nice whiskey, which in my mind I was like, how are they going to replace all this expensive whiskey and explain like what, you know what I mean? I'm thinking like all this crazy, like I'm thinking like way too deep into it.
Oh yeah.
And like they're eating all this food and they're taking the baths and all that. Well, shit hits the fan when the family decides, hey, we're fucking coming back. But when they call, they're like, we're 8 minutes out, have some fucking ramen ready or whatever. I don't remember what it was, but it was essentially.
And then it was like the movie became a totally different thing.
Yes.
We turned it off at the dinner scene.
Oh my God.
Right? That's how close we were to the movie popping off.
Oh my God, dude. Yeah, I couldn't have. So to touch on your point of you root for them. So the first time that it got brought to my attention, this is definitely not something I realized. People have realized this forever. But the genius of Alfred Hitchcock is that, and if people that don't know this about me, I am a huge Alfred Hitchcock fan. And I understand a lot of those movies they're not unwatchable to me. I love them, but I understand some of the off-putting stuff because things have just been done better at this point, because of him. But a lot of his stuff is great. But in Psycho, there's a part in the movie where he puts her body in the trunk of the car and he pushes the car out into the lake and the car doesn't sink immediately. And then you as an audience member, you start going like, oh, fuck, sink.
Yep.
Come on, sink. And then when you realize you're rooting for this evil son of a bitch,
Psycho,
you're like, whoa, what just happened?
Yes.
And that to me is such a genius thing, and it's been done a ton of times since then.
I would wager that there's a lot of people that root for him and never finish the movie and never realized they were rooting for a serial killer.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They
exactly.
They never processed it. They were just rooting for the main character of a movie they watched.
Exactly. That is such a holy shit moment. If you do realize it, you're like, I just rooted for this guy to get away with murder. Like,
yeah, it's like waking up from the Matrix, right? You're like, oh no, I just did a thing.
Right. So basically, they don't have enough time to get the fuck out of there, and they're hammered, and the place is a wreck, right? And so they have 10 minutes to cook. She has to cook this food because the only person who was supposed to be there was the housekeeper, which was the mom.
Yeah,
she was staying there. The rest of them obviously did not live in the house. So she starts cooking. Everybody's cleaning up and all this stuff. And
it was like one of those 80s movies where they were trying to clean up the party from the night before for the parents get home. That's exactly what that whole scene was. and it's like an homage to that, but in a different kind of style movie.
Right, and we totally skipped over a huge part of this that I forgot about, because before that happened, the didn't the old housekeeper show up?
During the party, yes.
Yeah. So,
which is a gigantic plot twist.
Yes. So before the parents and the kid call and say they're coming back home or whatever, the old housekeeper shows up at the door, and she's ringing at the gate, and she's ringing the bell, and they're like,
and the whole time you're rooting for this family that just got her fired by going, "Don't answer the door. Don't answer the door. Don't answer the door."
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you know what I mean? You're rooting for them to say, "Don't do it. Don't fucking answer that door."
But you're like, right? you kind of know, just because of how
something's happening, but
how
you're
weird.
Not sure what's going to happen. You're not sure where it's going to go awry, right? You know that when she rings the doorbell and begs to get in the house, you're like, something's up, but I don't know what's happening.
Well, because so she says, like, "What do you need?" And she says, "I left something in the basement. I left in such a rush, I didn't have time to get it. I got to get down there." And you're like, "What?" Like, what are you talking about? And for whatever reason, they're like, "Yeah, fucking come on in."
Yeah, they let that bitch in.
And
what the fuck?
She's like, "You can come down here with me if you want." And she's kind of real creepy about it. So this is the part where you're like, "What the fuck is this?" You know, like, what is going on? And she's like, "No, you go ahead." And she's just like kind of sitting there waiting for her. And then,
the little old lady's trying to push that fucking shelf open so hard.
Dude, she's like wedged between the wall and the
fucking shelf, dude, and pushing hard as fuck.
Right. So basically, she, it cuts in there, and then so she helps her open this secret door that's behind a pantry, and there's like this subterranean like bunker essentially.
Oh man, it goes forever down too. It's crazy.
Yeah, so it's a basement essentially, but it's it's below the basement even. So it's like the basement.
Oh, it's way below. It's like 3 or 4 levels below where the basement would be. I mean, they took like 3 or 4 turns when they were going down the stairs.
Right. So it's this subterranean like bunker. So at this point you're like, what in the absolute fuck is this?
Yeah.
And it turns out the old housekeeper's husband is living in the bunker.
Yes, the whole time.
And you're like, what? And he's like,
and it turns out the fucking family didn't even know there was a bunker, and he's been living down there rent free the whole time for like years.
Yeah. So when the architect guy that built the house built it, he was like, it's common for these places to have these like bunkers for whatever reason, and I guess he was embarrassed about it for some reason, so he didn't tell them. Yep. And so the family had no idea this thing was even below their house. But there's this guy's living there, and it's like, what in the hell is going on? So while this shit's coming to a head, they like video, they find out the rest of the family's there with the so-called new housekeepers, and they find out they're all family, and they're mooching off this, they're living for free and taking advantage of this family or whatever. So they end up like videoing some shit, and they're like, we're going to send it to the family. And then there's this whole fight that ensues, and it gets weird, and they're all scuffling for shit. And they finally, like some shit goes down, and they get them back down in the basement. And they like tie him up and shit. And I think for a second,
action sequence that happened from thriller action sequence that happened from the moment that fucking old lady walked into that house to the very end of the movie was insane.
Right. And so to me though, this is the point where you're still kind of going like, what? So you have that first like hour that you're like, okay, like here we are. And then right at the hour point, you're like, well, okay, now shit's really weird. But to me though, the payoff is really still like the last 20 minutes. Like the last 20 minutes is like, holy shit. So basically they get the guy who was basement dwelling forever, they get him tied up down there. You kind of think that the old housekeeper's dead because she falls down the steps and cracks her head, and so you almost think she's dead, and they tie her up anyway.
You think she's dead like 4 or 5 times in this movie.
Right.
She's like the fucking chicken from the Family Guy.
Yeah.
It always fucking comes back.
So that's when the family calls and says, hey, we're back on our way back. So it's fucking raining. Our kid's a piece of shit. He wants some ramen or whatever it's called. And have that shit ready. It's better start boiling the water now. And they're like, oh my God. Yeah. And so they're like scurrying to clean up and fucking figure it out. And they all have to like hide in different places because the family pulls up and they're walking in, and somehow they cook this badass noodle meal in like 8 minutes. And But anyway,
Yeah, that's
you know,
crazy.
so there's this really like intense, like probably what 5 or 10 minutes of the movie where it's like they're in the house with the family and they're all hiding and trying to figure it out.
Yes, it's like a game of hide and seek where only one side knows they're hiding.
Yes, and so and even in that point, you're like, please get out of there. Like you, like
You're still rooting for them. The con artists that have maybe murdered that nanny now, you're rooting for them.
exactly, and so they get out of the house though. When it's all said and done, everyone obviously the mom stays because she's supposed to be there, but but they get out of the house. They then find out that their whole neighborhood has gotten flooded and there's like sewage everywhere. And
Yeah, it's crazy.
Their house is pretty much underwater, which was already underground, but now it's full of water. And they're trying to salvage their shit, and they're having these realizations that not necessarily that they're in the wrong, but like what the fuck are they going to do next? And the dad has this really cool like him when him and the son are laying. Then they end up going to like a public place, like a big gymnasium, and they're all because everyone's house is fucked, and they're like laying on the floor or whatever. And they have this whole conversation, which is a really cool moment in the movie. The dad said some shit that like hit me like in the oof zone where he's like, yeah, man, just don't make plans and then shit can't go wrong. And I was like, ooh, hey, personal attacks coming at me. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
because earlier in the movie he had said, I got this, don't worry guys, I'll take care of it. I have a plan.
I've got a plan.
And then in that scene in the gym or whatever, he was just like, what was that plan from earlier? And he's like, no plan.
Right.
Like, you said you had a plan. He's like, no plan. My plan is to not have a plan because then nothing can go wrong.
Yeah. When he said that, I was like, well, you didn't have to come for me, but here we are. But no, but then I guess it's the very next day. Is that when they get invited to the party? It's the next day, right? Or at least like a day after that, maybe.
They call them in the gymnasium and invite them to the party.
So they're like, and because the family has no idea all this shit has gone down still.
Yeah. They're
just like, and another thing when they're all hiding, to touch back on, because we talked about this earlier, when they're all hiding, the mom and the dad decide to sleep on the couch, and they're all under the coffee table thing, and the kid's like, I'm sleeping outside, and he's got a teepee and shit.
And he smells the dad.
And he says that smell, and he brings up the smell again. Oh, it's a smell that he basically is like. He basically says
fun of poor people.
Yeah, it's what poor people smell like. Because he doesn't say those words, but
and so now you're back on the family so hard, rooting for them to fuck these rich people over.
Right. So anyway, they get out of the house. Obviously, we talked about that part, but then they're pretty much in a FEMA camp. Or the equivalent of, you know what I mean? Essentially, that's where they're at. They get these texts and calls like, "Hey, come to the party tomorrow. We're gonna have a party, and we love you guys." And
they text each one of them individually, not knowing that they're all in the same place.
And now the mom's still there, right?
Yes.
And the fucking old housekeeper and her husband are like still locked in the fucking basement.
Yes, they're in the fucking bunker.
And at this point, you're like, they're probably dead or whatever. And you're like,
these people have murdered these people.
Yes.
And we're still rooting for them.
So they set up the party. They all show up to the party, right? Now, this is where it really kicks the fuck off because this is the payoff that makes you go like, holy shit. Like, and so basically there's a few scenes of everybody at the party and they're doing their thing and it's like outside and the wife and the husband have all their rich friends over to celebrate the kid's birthday and, it's a whole shindig, right? Everybody's there. Well, during the whole thing, someone goes down into the basement to check on these people. The son, right? Yes, it's the son. He goes down to check on them. Well, they're not dead. And the husband has gotten free. And he fucking comes for the son and like tries to tie him up, and then the son gets away essentially for a minute, and then he runs up the steps, and he gets fucked up coming out of the steps because he's got the thing around his neck, and he falls, and then the dude takes that rock, which was the gift, right?
Yep.
And like smashes his fucking skull in basically.
Yep.
And you go like, oh my god, and then like they don't show it at first, and you're like, what just happened? What the fuck? And so at this point the dad. I don't want to get into like all the little stuff because we're so excited into this and to talk about that in Morse code with the light and all that stuff. Like you'll just see that part. But he's been pushing this button with his forehead, so his face is all bloody. This is the original housekeeper's husband who's been locked in the basement forever. And he's like bloody as fuck. And then he like picks the stone up, and then it cuts to the kid, to the son, and he's like laying in a pool of blood behind his head. You're like, oh, he's fucking dead.
Yep.
And then he like throws the rock on his head again, but they like full blown show it.
Yeah.
And you're like, Jesus Christ. And then he's like, fuck this, walks out, grabs a giant butcher knife, right? And so this is like, there's 20 minutes left in the movie right now. So this is the part where I'm like, this is where the payoff is like, holy shit. Like,
yes. Because what seems like a sweet, kind of dark grifter movie has turned into a full-blown action thriller.
Yeah. And so outside, and I love this like contrast because it fits. And if you watch the movie, we're explaining a lot of this poorly because we're trying, we're just kind of blowing through it and excitedly talking about it. But the dynamic between that poor life and the rich life is perfectly portrayed in the very next scene when he walks outside, and it's like, it's essentially like South Korean Leave It to Beaver, but like extremely rich people. So
super rich.
Yeah.
People.
So everyone is like dressed to the, in their fucking Sunday best or whatever. And they're singing happy birthday. They got the cake out, and everyone's like super smiley and bright and happy. And then the dude walks out of the patio door with a butcher knife, and he's covered in blood, and no one sees him at first. Right. They're all happy birthday and fucking jerking each other off or whatever, and it's like a super happy fun time. And then he
stands there. That scene where he stands there outside for like 3 beats.
Yeah.
Was brilliant.
And then when he like walks out, so at this point, the sister of the con artist family is out there with the son and the mom and all them, and he runs out, and is he the first person? Is she the first person that gets it?
The daughter.
Yeah, the daughter. Yeah. So she's like, what the fuck's going on?
And she gets stabbed right in the chest.
Right in the chest. Just boom. You're like, holy shit. At this point, obviously, people start fucking scattering and like, what is going on? And then it's just full on chaos. The dad sees the daughter get stabbed. The mom sees the daughter get stabbed. The son is dead on the floor in there, like in the kitchen. And you're like, what the fuck is this? Of course, does the mom get it next or somebody? He starts just pretty much wildly stabbing and
they the mom didn't get it, but like he went after the rich people at that point, and then like you thought that the dad was going to step in and stop it, right? And he does at one point, and then they obviously kill the old guy that came out of the basement.
Well, once the whole bit though, this whole like, and they keep playing this dynamic was that whole the rich guy pretty much shitting on the poor was he was worried about his son. Now, obviously, that's your number one priority as a parent. I'm not saying he's wrong for that, but as this guy's still attacking people, he's like, drive us to the thing, and he's like, they don't know at this point that this is a family. Like this guy's watching his family get murdered by this guy because he just thinks they're all independent of whoever. So it's like, it's all fucked.
Like, why are you so worried about that person?
Right.
Who cares? Let's go.
And then he's like, throw me the keys, give me the keys, give me the keys. And when he does throw him the keys, like the scuffle, they like fall on top of the keys.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so there's a struggle, and then the guy, the fucking knife-wielding maniac, he gets stabbed with like a barbecue skewer in the side or whatever. Yeah. And, you're like, okay, that fucking guy's dead. But the dad, the rich guy that owns the house, he has to get the keys from under him to get his son to the hospital and all that.
Yep.
And he, even when he picks the guy up, he like holds his nose like, oh, he smells like poor people, and like grabs the keys. And then that's when the shit really hits the fan.
Yeah.
Like, I say really hits the fan. There's been a massacre.
So it's not already hit the fan.
There's been a massacre at a birthday party.
Yeah. Well, that's when another turn happens, and something that you did not expect was going to happen happens, and the dad turns on the rich guy.
Right. And then he's like, fuck you. Bam. Stabifies him. And then at that point, that's when everyone just hauls it. Like everyone's gone.
Everybody's like, peace out. Everybody's stabbing everybody now. I'm out this motherfucker.
Yep. So and at this point, the son and the daughter are dead, presumably. And the dad and the mom is like, she's cut up and stuff, but she's good.
Yeah.
And then the dad has no injuries, but he's just killed this guy, and it's all fucked, right? Well, they all get the fuck out of there. And then it kind of cuts to the aftermath, right?
Yep.
And the son didn't die.
Nope.
He had to have brain surgery, and there's this whole really cool scene at the end where he's like laughing at everything, and people are like, "What the fuck's he laughing at?" And they're like, "Well, he just had brain surgery. That's a thing." They end up, obviously they blow the lid off this whole thing, and they're in court, and they get probation, him and his mom, and could have been way worse, obviously, because of all the charges they brought up. Dad can't be found anywhere; he's missing, and then daughter's dead for sure. Like she died.
Dead.
She got stabbed. She took one to the heart, so she was out. And so then he's like, we really don't know where Dad is. Like he was like, we don't know. Like, because you kind of think like, oh, he's hiding or whatever. And he's like, no, we have no idea. And then you see all the news channels that are like, we can't find him. All the closed circuit televisions didn't pick up on where he went. Yada yada yada. And this part I didn't even see coming. I did not. I don't know why, because it's obvious once it happens. But I did not see this happening. It cuts to the son sitting outside the house, right? And he's looking, and then all of a sudden the light starts flickering. And it's like the Morse code.
Yep.
And his fucking dad went into the basement. Now he's the fucking bunker dweller.
Yes.
It's come full circle.
Who has to sneak out at night. And the house has changed ownership.
Yeah, like a German family or some shit?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so he has to sneak out at night to get food and water and stuff. Yep. And it's so funny.
Yeah, so it's like the whole tables have turned and all that. And some other stuff happens, but I don't want to just full-blown give, we'd have given basically the ending, but if you saw it, you saw it. If you haven't, just watch the movie. It's so good. We just nerded out pretty hard and got super excited. So I'm sure this is just like, we're going to listen back to this. It's going to be rambling and
it's fine with me,
incoherent, but we had fun with it. It's a really, really good movie, guys. Go check it out.
We got it as a recommendation, right?
Yes, our buddy Christopher Wynn. Love you, buddy. Thanks for the recommendation. He's actually on one of the episodes I don't think we've released yet. So
no, we haven't.
Will be not the next one, but the one after that, I think, because this will probably be our next episode. So,
well, we may skip RC in line though if his bar's about to open.
Yes. So, but yeah, I think you should check out Parasite. It's a really great movie. For those of you who aren't keen on subtitled flicks, maybe give it a shot just to see if you can get into this one, because it's a really great story.
Do.
It's
very, very good.
Yep,
it's a brilliant movie in its own right. It's brilliant.
Oh yeah, man. And also just check out some other stuff. Like I said, if you are a fan of this movie, go check out some of the Chan-wook Park movies. They're really great. Old Boy. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance and Lady Vengeance are all great movies. Takashi Miike. And if you have any suggestions for not just Asian directors or writers or anything, but any movie suggestions, I'm down. I talk about this with some of my friends in a group message. I'm kind of a simpleton when it comes to cinema. Like, I want to like artsy movies, but I usually just get bored pretty easy. And it's not anything against those movies. Like, I'm sure they're brilliant. I'm just an idiot, basically. So.
You said it.
I just, it just is what it is, but I'll give anything a shot. So if you have recommendations, but with the theme of this one, especially anything, Korean directors, Japanese directors, things like that. Just give us a shout out and let us know what to watch. If you have any other suggestions on things to watch or listen to or any of those things, hit us up on the social media. We've got the McRADcast page on Facebook and Twitter. Instagram, and you can send us an email at stayradpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll definitely take a look at anything you got, and if we think we can do it justice, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, man.
Is there anything else you wanted to throw out there for this episode?
I think we're good, man.
Awesome. Well, guys, I really appreciate everybody. You guys have given us a lot of good feedback and support, and we're going to try to keep this thing going. So once again, if you have any suggestions, just let us know, because we want to talk about it. So thanks for listening, everybody. And as always, stay rad.